Good morning and welcome to the first reading from Sins of the Angels, my supernatural thriller series. Um, I am Lydia Hawk. I also write as Linda Poitvin under the romance category. I have another page here on Facebook, and I've been doing a series of readings there. I started last week, kind of just as an experiment, see how it went, and I'm having so much fun, and the people who are tuning in seem to be enjoying it as well. So it seems like, you know what, we're all in this together, we're all in this for a while, and if I can help provide a moment's diversion, then I'm more than happy to do so. Plus, it gets me out of bed, dressed, out of my pajamas, because, vanity. So, anyways, as I was looking for the book to read from, I suddenly realized that I do not have a latest cover for the Sins of the Angels. The new series of covers is designed more like this. This is the second in the series, Sins of the Sun. So if you're looking for the series, they are there. This is the book I'm reading from. Same book inside, different cover. So I will just dive right in. We're going to start with the prologue and then move on to chapter 1. So I hope you enjoy. It was done. There could be no turning back. Cain stared down at the destruction he'd wrought and held back a shudder. They would come after him, of course, as they had the first time. They couldn't allow him to succeed, couldn't risk him finding a way back and opening a door to the others. They would send someone to hunt him, try to imprison him in that place again. His breath snared in his chest, and for a moment the awfulness of the idea made him quail inside, made his mind go blank. An eternity of mind-hollowing emptiness, of nothingness. His belly clenched at the thought. That he had escaped at all was a miracle. Whatever happened, he couldn't go back. He could never go back. He curled his hands into fists at his sides and made himself focus on now, not then, not what if, because he could do this. He could do what the other, his visitor, had told him was possible. He could find the right one who would open the door to where he belonged, who would let him go home again. It was just a matter of time, a matter of numbers. Cain looked again at the corpse by his feet. But he would have to be more careful if he wanted to succeed. This one had been messy. He crouched and touched a withered fingertip to the crimson that welled from the gash in the mortal's chest. He rubbed the viscous fluid between thumb and forefinger and studied his work, displeased with the lack of control he saw there, the haste. He scowled at the frisson of remembered wanton pleasure that even now edged down his spine, making his heart miss a beat. Fucking heaven, he disliked that side of himself, the part that thrilled at the destruction. He had never wanted this, had tried so hard not to give in to what she had claimed to see. He wished he'd had another choice, that she'd given him another choice. But whether he was here by choice or not, he would do well to maintain better control. If one of her hunters had been near just now, his search would have been over before it began. He'd been so caught up in his task he wouldn't have felt an approach until it was too late. No, to stay ahead of her, ahead of the hunter she sent for him, he needed to rein himself in, to contain the bloodlust that clouded his mind, to be disciplined. Cain lifted his head and breathed in the alley musk scented with rain and death. He needed to be faster, too. Finding one of the few he could use among the billions that existed now, the task seemed nothing short of monumental. He wiped bloody claws on the corpse's clothing and then, on impulse, reached over and spread the corpse's arms straight out, perpendicular to the body, and crossed the ankles over one another. Pushing to his feet, he surveyed his handiwork with twisted satisfaction. Perfect. Even if she never saw it herself, she would know of his contempt, know what he thought of the esteem in which her children still held her. He drew a deep breath into his lungs and stretched his wings over his head, letting his body fill out again, taking on flesh and warmth. He reveled in the fierce pleasure of his own aliveness, the pull of wet cotton against his skin, the remains of the summer rain dripping from his hair, the thick, sullen night air unrelieved by the storm that had proclaimed his return, the sheer gratification of feeling. He cast a last dispassionate glance at the remains on the pavement, folded his wings against his back, and started down the alley toward the street. His mind moved beyond the kill to other matters, such as finding a place to stay, somewhere he could hide, where a hunter wouldn't think to look for him. Kame emerged from the alley onto the sidewalk and looked up the deserted pavement to his left, then his right. Somewhere. He paused, staring across the street. He grinned. Then he laughed. Somewhere. Interesting. Chapter 1. That was the thing about a murder scene, Alexandra Jarvis reflected. It would be difficult to drive past one and later claim you couldn't find the right place, no matter how much you wanted to. She wheeled her sedan into the space behind a Toronto Police Service car angled across the sidewalk. Alternating blue and red spilled from the cruiser's bar lights, splashing against the squat brick building beside it, and announcing the hive of activity in the dank alley beyond. Powerful floodlights brought in to combat the dark pre-dawn hours backlit the scene, and yellow crime scene tape stretched across the alley's mouth. And just in case Alex needed further confirmation she'd found the right place, a mob of media looked to be in a feeding frenzy street side of a wooden police barricade, microphones and cameras thrust into the faces of the two impassive, uniformed officers holding them at bay. One of the uniforms glanced over as she killed her engine, acknowledging her arrival with a nod. Alex took a gulp of lukewarm, over-sugared coffee and balled up her fast food breakfast wrapper. She'd bought the meal on her way home as a combined supper and bedtime snack, knowing her refrigerator to be woefully empty. The nearest she could figure, it was the first food she'd had in almost 20 hours, and she hadn't made it past the first bite before she'd been called to this, another murder. She had eaten it on her way over, even knowing what she would face when she got here. Working homicide had that effect on you after a while. She stuffed the wrapper into the empty paper bag, drained the remainder of her coffee, and dropped the cup in with the wrapper. Then she slid out of the air-conditioned vehicle. The early August humidity slammed into her like a fist, oozing from the very pores of the city. Alex grimaced. After a storm like the one that had raged from midnight until almost 3, knocking out power to most of the city's core for the better part of an hour, surely they'd earned at least a brief respite from the sauna-like weather. She fished in her blazer pocket for a hair elastic, checked that her police shield was still clipped to her waistband, and scraped back her shoulder-length blonde hair as she kneed shut the car door and started toward the alley. The media piranhas, scenting new prey, engulfed her. "Detective, can you describe, is this death related?" The questions flew at her, fast and furious, each becoming lost in the other. Alex elbowed her way through the throng and shouldered past a television camera, wrapping the elastic around her fistful of hair. If any of them knew how many coffees and how little sleep she operated on, they wouldn't be so eager to get this close. She patted her pockets in an automatic inventory. Pen, notebook, gloves. Lord, but her partner had picked a fine time to retire and take up fly fishing. Davis was 100 times more diplomatic than she was, and she'd always counted on him to run media interference for her at these times. She hoped to heaven his eventual replacement would be as accommodating. "Don't know, can't say, and no comment," she told the piranhas. She winced at the snarl in her voice, glad her supervisor wasn't there to overhear. "We'll let you know when we have a statement for you, just like we always do." The uniform who had acknowledged her arrival lifted the tape so she could duck beneath it. "Yeah," he muttered, "and the sharks will keep circling anyway, just like they always do." Alex flashed him a sympathetic look and headed down the alley, her focus shifting to the tall, lanky man silhouetted against the floodlights, and to the scene he surveyed. Her stomach rolled uneasily around its grease-laden meal. Even from here she could see the remains of a bloodbath. Splashes of shadows darkened the brick walls on either side of the narrow passageway, and rivulets of water, stained dark, ran together to pool on the pavement where they reflected crimson under the floodlights. Alex scanned the alley as she strode deeper into its belly. She passed a sodden cardboard box, mentally catalogued it as nothing out of the ordinary, and continued without breaking stride. Her gaze flicked over a numbered flag placed by forensics and the blurred shoe imprint that it marked in a patch of mud. Another sat beside a door where nothing visible remained, likely the site of something already bagged and tagged. She inhaled a slow breath through her nose as she got closer to the scene. If this was the same as the others, if it was another slashing, she blew out the air in a soft gust, drew back her shoulders, and lifted her chin. If it was another slashing, she would handle it as she did any other case, she told herself. Professionally, efficiently, thoroughly, because that was how she worked, because her past had no place here. She stepped over the electric cables powering the floodlights and joined Staff Inspector Doug Roberts, head of their homicide unit. A tarp a few feet in front of him covered the vague form of a human body. "Good sleep?" Roberts asked, looking sideways and down at her. Even raised over the guttural thum of the generator powering the lights, his voice held a dry note. He knew she'd never made it home. None of their shift had. Again. Alex snorted. "Nah, I figured the concept was highly overrated, so I settled for caffeine." She ran a critical eye over her staff inspector's height, noting the 2 days' growth along his dark jawline. Perspiration plastered his short-cropped hair to his forehead, and she felt her own tresses wilt in mute sympathy. If the air out in the street had been heavy, here in the alley it was downright oppressive. The man looked ready to drop. "What about you?" she asked, wondering if she'd have to call for another gurney. He grunted. "Ditto on the sleep, but I missed out on the caffeine." That explained it. Given enough Java in his or her system, a homicide cop could run almost indefinitely. But without. Alex's gaze slid to the tarp. "Well?" she asked. "We won't know for sure until the autopsy." But silence, because he didn't know or because he didn't want to say. "Chest ripped open, throat slit, posed like the others," he said finally. "Damn it," she muttered. She scuffed the toe of her shoe against a dandelion growing through the pavement. 4 bodies in as many days, with the last 2 less than 12 hours apart. She flinched as one of the floodlights gave a sudden loud pop, and the light in the alley dimmed a fraction. Underneath a loading dock, someone bellowed for a replacement bulb, his voice muffled. Alex pushed a limp lock off her forehead, scrunched her fist over it for a moment, and said again, "Damn it. Damn it. Damn it." She released her clutch on her scalp and balanced hands on hips. "Is forensics finding anything? After the rain we just had? We're lucky the body didn't float away." "Maybe the killer's waiting for it," she mused. "The rain, I mean. Maybe he knows it will wash away the evidence." "So what? He's a disgruntled meteorologist?" Roberts shook his head. "The weather's too unpredictable for someone to rely on it like that, especially lately. None of these storms last week were even in the forecast. I think it's just bad luck for us." She sighed. "You're probably right. So, has the chief called for a task force yet?" "Not yet, but my guess is it's about to become a priority. I'll put in a call to him and get the ball rolling. The sooner we get a profiler working on this psycho, the better. You have a look around here, then go home, okay? I've put Jolie and Adams on point for this one. You've been on your feet longer than anyone else on this so far, and you need some sleep." Alex rolled her eyes. "If this guy keeps up at the rate he's going," she muttered, "I can pretty much guarantee that won't happen. If this guy keeps up at the rate he's going, I'm going to need you on your toes, not dropping from exhaustion. So let me rephrase that. Get some sleep." Staff Inspector Roberts stalked away, his long legs covering the distance to the end of the alley in remarkably few strides. Alex watched him bulldoze his way through the waiting scavengers, and then, with a sigh that came all the way from her toes, she turned back to the bloody, rain-washed alley. Roberts was right. The others were getting more downtime than she was on this case. They always did on slashings, because as much as she liked to pretend her past had no bearing on her present, no one else brought the same unique perspective to these cases that she did, the kind of perspective that made her drive herself a little harder, a little longer, and made sure she wouldn't sleep much until it was over. The Dominion Verkiel of the Fourth Choir of Angels stared at the highest seraph's office door, and then, grimacing, she raised her hand to knock. She didn't look forward to delivering bad news to Heaven's executive administrator, but she could think of no way to avoid the task, and standing here would make it no easier. A resonant voice, hollowed by the oaken door, spoke from within. "Enter." Verkiel paused on the ornate metal handle, pushed down on the ornate metal handle, and stepped inside. Mitron, overseer of 8 of the 9 choirs, sat behind his desk on the far side of the book-lined room, intent on writing. Verkiel cleared her throat. "Is it important?" Mitron asked. He did not look up. Verkiel suppressed a sigh. The highest knew she would never intrude without reason, but since the cleanse he had taken every opportunity he could to remind her of her place. In fact, if she thought about it, he had been so inclined even prior to the cleanse, but that was long behind them, and made no difference now. She folded her hands into her robe, counseled herself to ignore the slight, and made her tone carefully neutral. "Forgive the intrusion, highest, but we've encountered a problem." The highest seraph looked up from his work and fixed pale golden eyes on her. It took everything in Verkiel not to flinch or apologize. She tightened her lips. Her former soulmate had always had the uncanny knack of making her feel as though any issue she brought before him was her fault. Over the millennia, it had just become that much worse. "Tell me," he ordered. "I am aware of the situation," he interrupted, returning to his task. Irritation stabbed at her. She so disliked this side of him. "I don't think so. There's more to it than we expected." After making her wait several more seconds, Mitron laid aside his pen and sat back in his chair. "Where Kame is concerned, there is always more than expected. But go on." "The mortals have launched an investigation into Kame's work. They're calling him a serial killer." "A valid observation, given what he's been up to." "Yes, well, because the police officers involved will be more likely than most mortals to put themselves in his path, I thought it prudent to warn their guardians, to have them pay particular attention to keeping their charges safe." Verkiel hesitated. "Yes?" "And one of the officers doesn't have a guardian." Mitron waved an impatient hand. "Don't be ridiculous. Every mortal has a guardian." "You know that's not true." "Fine. Then every mortal has the opportunity to have a guardian. If this one has rejected his, that's his choice. He is of no concern to us." "That's what I thought at first. But I thought it prudent also to make certain, and, well, she is of concern. Great concern." The highest seraph frowned. He tilted back in the chair, and a shadow fell across his face, darkening the gold of his gaze to amber. "She is Nephilim." "She is descended from their line, yes." "That does complicate matters." "Yes." "What do you suggest we do?" Verkiel shook her head, no closer to a solution now than she had been when she'd first heard the news herself. Uninvited, she crossed the study and settled into one of the enormous wing chairs opposite him. "I don't know," she admitted. "How far back are her roots?" "We're not sure. We're attempting to trace her, but it will take time. Even if the lineage is faint, however." Mitron nodded even as Verkiel let her words die away. "There may still be a risk," he agreed. "Yes." Mitron levered himself out of his chair and paced to the window overlooking the gardens. His hands, linked behind his back, kept up a rhythmic tapping against his crimson robe. Out in the corridor the murmur of voices approached, another door opened and closed, and the voices disappeared. "What about assigning a guardian to her?" he asked, his voice thoughtful. Verkiel shook her head. She'd already considered and dismissed the possibility. Even if we could get one to agree to watch over a Naphil, no guardian would stand a chance against a fallen angel, especially not one as determined as Came. Mitron looked over his shoulder at her. Not that kind of guardian. What other kind of guardian is there? A power. A power? One of my powers? With all due respect, Mitron, there is no way a hunter would agree to act. Not just any power, Mitron interrupted. Aramael. Verkiel couldn't help it. She snorted. You can't be serious. Mitron turned from the window, his eyes like chips of yellow ice, and Verkiel's insides shriveled. She paused to formulate her objection with as much care as she could. She needed to be clear about the impossibility of Mitron's suggestion. She had allowed him to sway her She had allowed him to sway her once before where Aramael and Came were concerned, and could not do so again. And not just for Aramael's sake. Hunting Came very nearly destroyed him the first time, she said. We cannot ask him again. He is a power, Verkiel. The hunt is his purpose. He'll recover. There must be some other way. Name one angel in all of heaven who would risk a confrontation with a fallen one to protect a Nephil, no matter how faint the lineage. Verkiel fell silent. The highest knew she could name no such angel because none existed. Not one of heaven's ranks had any love for the Nephilim, and Verkiel doubted she could find one who might even feel a stirring of pity for the race. The one herself had turned her back on the bloodline, a constant reminder of Lucifer's downfall, denying them the guidance of the guardians who watched over other mortals. She had left them to survive, or in most cases not, on their own. But this was different, and both Verkiel and the highest knew it. Where this particular Naphil was concerned, surviving Came was essential, for all their sakes. Verkiel felt herself waver. She rested her elbows on the chair's arm, fingertips pressed to her lips, tried and failed to think of an alternative. It will consume him, she said at last. Came already consumes him, which is why we will ask him. The moment you mention Came's name, Aramael will do anything necessary to complete the hunt, even if it means protecting one of the Nephilim. Mitron left the window and returned to his desk. Apparently having decided the matter, he was closed. He lowered himself into the chair and picked up his pen. See to it, and keep me informed. Despite the obvious dismissal, Verkiel hesitated. The highest's logic made a certain kind of sense, but sending Aramael after Came for a second time felt wrong, very wrong. He was already the most volatile of all the powers, barely acquiescing to any standard of control at the best of times. How much worse would he be after this? The highest seraph lifted his head and looked at her. You have a problem, Dominion? She did, but could think of no way to voice her elusive misgivings. At least none that Mitron would take seriously. She rose from her chair. No, highest, no problem. Mitron's voice stopped her again at the door. Verkiel. She looked back. We will keep this matter between us. He put pen to paper and began to write. There is no need to alarm the others. Mitron laid aside his pen as the door snapped shut behind the Dominion. Leaning back, he rested his head against the chair, closed his eyes, and willed the tension from his shoulders. He was becoming so very tired of Verkiel's resistance. Every other angel under his authority obeyed without question, without comment, but not Verkiel. Never Verkiel. Perhaps it was because of their former soulmate status when, out of respect, he had treated her more as an equal, a mistake he'd realized too late and had paid for ever since. The cleanse had been intended to provide a clean slate between them, between all the angels, but it hadn't been as effective in every respect. Not as he would have liked. Not for the first time he considered placing the Dominion elsewhere, where they wouldn't be in such constant contact with one another. Also not for the first time he discarded the idea. She was too valuable as a handler of the powers, particularly where Aramael was concerned, and particularly now. Mitron sighed, straightened, and reached again for his pen. No, he'd keep her in place for the moment. As long as she followed orders, however grudgingly, it would be best that way. If she didn't, well, former soulmate or not, he was able to discipline an uncooperative angel. More than able. And that is the end of chapter 1. Hope you'll forgive me my many stumbles over that. Not used to this whole reading aloud thing. My voice keeps threatening to give out on me too. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, I hope I will see you back here again tomorrow for chapter 2. Also, feel free to share the link once this goes up on Facebook with anyone that you think might enjoy it as well. The more the merrier. Wherever you are and whatever you're up to today, I hope that you are having a good day. Quiet Sunday at home for everybody. We'll get through this. And it's a big book. Should keep us busy for a little bit. Take care, and I will see you again tomorrow. Bye-bye.